Good morning, everyone. Today is the 19th day of the month of Elul. It is also the 14th day of the month of September. I think I got it right today. And welcome to our class of the Four Worlds. We are currently on page 35 and 34. And today we have a treat because I want to show everyone who is here. You should be able to see not just my pretty face, but everyone's face here. Robert ran out. That's okay.
Wait a second, Robert, I'll join you.
Say hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi,
Morning.
Mom. Hi, Mom.
Morning.
Hi, Michael.
You got to look into the camera, not there.
Where's the camera?
Right in
Oh,
front of you.
Hi, Michael. Love you. Hope you're watching.
Robert, smile.
Robert, smile for the camera.
Serene.
All right. Okay, now you see how I feel for an hour here. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we are now on page 34, as I explained, and we have gone through the four worlds, and in each world there are 10 levels to transmit the energy of God from the highest places until it comes to this world. Last week we started getting into even a deeper level than these four worlds. This is called the hidden Sephirot, the hidden 10 levels, which are not confined to which are not confined to any world, because they are so remote, they are so high that the confines of a world won't be able to handle this, won't be able to tolerate this. They are hidden, meaning remote, meaning esoteric, meaning beyond definition, beyond vessel, beyond the capability of being held in a vessel. When you have a tap and you put in a little coffee cup, so you let the water run and you put your cup in and it fills it up. If you go outside and turn on the hose and it's full force, you have a little coffee cup, it ain't going to work. So you're going to have a bucket. And when you're at a waterfall, you try to take a bucket there, that's not going to work. So you need a vessel that would be designed to accept the flow. And so when you're dealing with something as remote, as godly, as infinite, as the godly energy before the four worlds, higher than the world called of Atzilus, which is called the God world, as we have studied at length, then you're talking about something that doesn't even have a vessel. But it has to have the 10. One can ask, well, what about the 10? 10 is also a confined number. It has to have the 10, because if you're going to turn it into 10, eventually, if it's going to go through a world that has 10 in it, then it also has to have the thought of that, before the action of that, has to be somewhere. So the preparation or the planning of that has to be in a place somewhere. And so he's talking about those 10 now, the 10 remote levels, the higher levels. And so what he said last week was that when one has an idea that comes from intellect, the intellect of God, and he begins to share, you would think that one may suggest that something is sort of, a piece is missing from God, because it's coming out of God now, and then eventually it's going to be away from God. But he says, he compares it to a candle. This is what we just began to touch on last week. When you light one candle from another candle, nothing is diminished from the first candle. It shares its flame. And God is compared to a fire in the Torah, in the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Devarim that we are in now. We're about to finish the book in another 5 weeks from Friday. on Simchas Torah. And so the book over there says that God is a God of fire, a fire that consumes. Now, a God isn't a fire. A fire is a intangible physical reality. There is no fire up in heaven. There is no fire down in hell. It's not a fire. We just use metaphors like that to be able to help us comprehend, to understand something. So a fire is not God, but he's compared to a fire. Well, if you think about the fire, it's the strongest energy that we have in this world. It's the most spiritual, intangible energy that we have in this world. It produces light. It produces heat. It produces fire. It can help in so many different ways. It can help to heat. It can help to light. It can help to cook. It can help to melt things. I mean, there's so many things it could do if you have it in the right place. So God is compared to a fire only because we don't have any other example in this world that is a spiritual example. So when you take a flame from a fire and you kindle another fire with it, you have not taken anything away from the first fire. One benefits and the other one doesn't lose anything. With other things, it might happen that way. When you give something, when you impart something, you give it away, you're giving it. So if you give money to someone to start off a business, you don't have that money anymore. You hope that that business will collect the original money, but it's a risk that you take. You don't know. Right now, you don't have it. Giving it away. So let's see, Flame to Flame, page 34. This will explain the metaphor of kindling one lamp from the flame of another. When one kindles a lamp from an existing flame, the emanation that takes place from the existing flame to the new one involves the fire and the light of the lamp. In other words, the spiritual aspect of the lamp, not its body and its materiality. You're not taking oil, you're not taking wax, you're not taking anything away, you're not taking the vessel that's holding this candlestick, you're just taking the flame, the fire of it, which produces heat. That's what you're taking when you kindle one from another. When you strike a match, and you light a fire, nothing happens to the match because you're not taking the match, you're just taking the flame. For instance, when one kindles a lamp filled with coarse and simple fat from a lamp filled with olive oil, so you've got olive oil in one lamp, in your kindled lamp, and in your unkindled lamp you've got fat from whatever, from an animal, from a vegetable, whatever it might be. The kindling does not impart any blemish to the olive oil. To the flame, yes, but not to the oil. And although the fire emanates from the olive oil lamp, it's coming from that place, nevertheless, its kindling is achieved by means of a lamp of fat. That means it's lighting fat now, which is coarse and unrefined in comparison to the refined substance of olive oil. And yet, the flame is able to light. Because you're not taking anything. How does fat have to connect to olive oil? It doesn't. You're not talking about taking anything other than the flame. So whatever else is there is irrelevant to the passing the torch, if you will, passing the flame. So that's the metaphor that is used of kindling a flame, because we are talking about imparting, sharing the energy, not the physical part of it, just the intangible, the spiritual energy. Similarly, is in the realm of intellect. An idea that comes to a person must have a source. You have to have a source for it because you need to have a brain, you need to have wisdom in the brain, and so on. And so if it's an idea, a person better have an idea of what they're talking about, right? Or what they're thinking about. If not, then it's not much of an idea. So, before the idea is conceived, it does not exist within the person. As it is written, wisdom emerges from nothing. It's in the book of Job, book of Eov. The man called Job has a book, a long book with many chapters, and this is towards the end of the book. He says, "V'hachachma ma'ayin timatzeh," and wisdom comes from nothing. From nothing. Wisdom comes from nothing. What does he mean by that? So he says, this in fact is the difference between chokhmah, which is invention, and bina, which is understanding. Invention means that you've invented it, and before you invented it, it didn't exist. So before the telephone was invented, it didn't exist. You can say it was in someone's mind. If it was, then somebody would have perhaps done something about it. It wasn't. I was just reading this morning in some website that on the day of September 11th, Bush was in Florida in a school, and they came over to tell him that they think it had been attacked, and they were concerned that this was an inside job because someone had said that Air Force One is next. And so he was sitting but he had to get onto Air Force One to get around. They took him out to sea. And then they took him, he was 3 hours flying, and then they dropped him off somewhere in a bunker in Colorado or something. Anyway, but Ari Fleischer, a fellow MOT, was taking notes. The BlackBerry was just about on the cusp of being invented. There was no such thing as a smartphone the way we have today. You don't have a Google phone or whatever, and so there was no real. The communication was very poor, and when you went overseas, they couldn't pick up the signals from the United States on the sea. And every time they came back, the television came back. Anyways, he says that they didn't invent yet the smartphone or the iPhone or whatever he called it then. We're talking 13 years ago, not 30 years ago. 13 years ago, we can't live today without this. I mean, you can live. You know what I mean. And I guarantee you, and I guarantee this, I guarantee you this, that in 10 years from now, you will not be able to live without one of this. That's for sure. Because, there won't be any more credit cards. You'll have it here. Everything will be here. And by then, they might invent some other thing.
They have watches.
Yeah, no, watches aren't going to take it.
He's not an Apple guy.
Oh.
Yeah, shut up. No I stuff. We're not into I, it's we. There's no I in T. For people who play in Shea Stadium, those are people who need iPhone. Anyway, so so he's explaining that when they got into the bunker, you see him sitting there on the phone with holding on to they don't have these things, and it wasn't at the fingertips, and because they didn't have that, they didn't have a lot of the communication that you would have had today. They didn't have it. Now, what happened then? People didn't invent it. Ideas come up, and then if a person has the ability to do something about it, then that idea can become brought into fruition. But when the idea is not here, then it's not in the world. It's just not here. You can't say, well, it's stored away somewhere. If it's stored away somewhere, you have an idea that's stored away somewhere, but then you've gotten it into the world. You've got it, you thought about it. But if a person thought about a telephone 500 years ago, it was science fiction. It was someone's imagination. It wasn't really an idea that anything could happen with it. Imaginations are in the wind. They're nowhere. They're nothing. They're not intangible. They can't be used. When our sages write in the Talmud, which was completed now, not compiled, but completed, about 1,800 years ago, they write that what's going to happen before the Mashiach comes, and they basically describe what's happening in this world today. That's taking an idea and writing it on paper and saying, now when you see these things, the feet of Mashiach are right around the corner. So you can call their bluff because they're taking an idea and they are presenting it. This is about to happen. The only thing is they don't really define. They don't tell you that it's going to be called a phone or whatever. They say that that technology will be unrecognizable, and they give the exact year when that will begin, which is when electricity was discovered in the 1850s, around there. And that's called taking an idea and doing something about it. If you don't write down your thoughts and it's not an idea. It's just a thought. It's an imagination, a dream. It's nothing. My kids asked me on Friday, how are flying cars going to work? Because there's no red lights, no traffic. I said there's also no streets. So you can see far away where people are, and you can do this. And they may have computer traffic things in front of you, or the car may fly without you. It may move things around by computer. I don't know. And I said, what made you think about flying cars? They said, oh, because we read yesterday somewhere. I said, they don't even have flying cars that are out there.
They do?
Hello? I know they do. But if you can buy me one, I'll give you $1 million for it. You can't buy them. It's not available. They do a lot of things have. Hey, they have Google Glasses. You have one? You want to buy one? You can't.
Yeah, you can buy one.
You can't really. In other words, it's not marketed out there. It's not there for your customers. You can work if you're connected to a university or something. You can get it, but it's not like there to get. It's not available. You can't walk into a car dealer shop or to a car worker shop and say, "Give me the car." It doesn't work that way. So and they have one that works, but they haven't perfected it. Every year you find another. Oh, today they have this kind of flying car. Where the wing is going to go? They go in. They're going to go up. They're going to go down. They're going to hit. I keep up with this stuff because I like the developments of these things. But it's not around, and it won't be around for a while.
They have planes that turn into cars.
That's
more common.
That's a flying car. It's the same thing. Same idea. They have floating planes, but you want to have a car, regular car. They haven't come up with that yet. There's a car that flies. I understand. It's like a little plane, and the wings go up instead of down. But it's not something that's practical, and you can't drive it on the streets. It's not available. That's what I mean. But they read something, so they're already thinking about what to do. But it's not here. It's fantasy right now. Anyway, so when you have an idea, not a dream, not a thought, but an idea that is a practical idea that you can physically understand how it's going to work, then you are now bringing it into a realm, bringing it down into something. Let's see what he says. Let's start again. Similarly, in the realm of intellect, the last paragraph, an idea that comes to a person must have a source. Before the idea is conceived, it does not exist within the person. Comes from, where does it come from? Nothing. As it is written, wisdom emerges from nothingness. This in fact is the difference between chokhmah, which is invention, and bina. The word chokhmah in Hebrew is wisdom. So wisdom is an invention, and bina means understanding, which is understanding. In bina, the idea exists even before it is understood and grasped. The idea that you are thinking about is there, but you're thinking about it now. You're just trying to understand it, and you're trying to make it practical. So the idea is there, you just haven't made it practical yet. It hasn't come down to earth. Which earth? In your brain. In Chokhmah, however, the idea does not exist until it is conceived. So in the wisdom area of ourselves, which is very remote and it's not even understandable, because you can only understand it after you've understood it. But before you understand it, it's still an idea that's coming to your head, a flash that's coming to your head. So in the chokhmah level of the person, in the flash level, in the remote level, the deepest part of a person, you have an idea. But it hasn't been developed yet. It hasn't been understood, it hasn't been grasped, it hasn't been, it's only been conceived. It hasn't been developed. This is one of the reasons that a new insight emerges through mental exertion. When a person really thinks hard, and a person has a background, and a person has the wherewithal and the ability, then that person, by using mental exertion, should be able to create an idea. Insights will not come to a person by themselves. This requires intense exertion. You've got to think. You've got to really, really let it go, let it think. And the more a person exerts his mind and extends his intellect, the greater will his insight and wisdom grow. The more you think about it, the more some people can lose themselves and begin to think, and they don't know what's flying around them. They'll get lost. They're in the Atzilus world or somewhere because they're thinking. And they can allow their minds, their mental energy, to take them over. And that means not just to think about what you're saying, but to think about all the avenues and consequences and expand it. For that, one needs tremendous amount of mental exertion. So you can sometimes go to a person and talk to them, and they won't even remember that happened, or they'll vaguely say, "Well, you said something," or because they were so involved, engrossed in their thoughts that took them over. It can take you over. People don't like to do that these days. We're all quick, instant. Just Google it, and you get the answer. But true insight, the person who made Google, or the person who made the things that appear on Google, the people who wrote those articles, had to really think. This is insights. This is a mental exercise that allows the process to go on. So you have to think. You have to think of something, and the idea is not just an idea, because you have to think about its length, its breadth, and its depth. In other words, what are the consequences? What are the things? What if I do this, I do that? And these people who play chess the right way, they think very, very strongly, because they're flying 50 moves ahead, and they have a plan. They have an idea. So if he does this, I'm going to do that. And they're working out all of these things in their minds. Then comes the other mind. It's a game of mind, or a computer mind. Right. The reason for this is that the insight emerges from non-existence to existence, and therefore requires exertion. Where is it coming from? It's coming from a place that it hasn't been here before, hasn't been in this world before. I'm inventing a car. No one's ever driven a car before. No one's ever gone into a car. How do I invent a machine that moves on a road, on anything, on a surface? So that person has to really, really use a lot of insight and a lot of wisdom, and the idea is born. So to take it, it's like the guy who came to the big town, and he saw a locomotive. That's what we used to use for trains, right? So he saw the locomotive, saw the train, and the train makes a big noise, lets out a big belch of steam, and it's on its way. And the guy says, "Are the horses under the big machine over here?" No, there's no horses. How is it possible to move without a horse? That's not possible, because it wasn't until they invented this. It was not possible to move anything without the horsepower. So now that you're doing it with steam or with coal or whatever it is, it was incomprehensible. How does it work? And that's exertion. That's understanding. That's a person who spent a lot of time, or people who spent lots of time trying to figure things out and invent things. And that's invention. Inventions come up all the time, because people allow themselves to think. And it's not just enough to think of something, but you have to think of every single aspect and area of it in order to make it work. And without that, it's not a proper idea. It's not a real thought. It's just, somewhere else. You may need some help of other people's mental exertion and ideas to bring it down. Now, the metaphor for this is the extraction of fire from a Flintstone. Even they make their way into here. The Flintstones. Fred, how you doing?
That's funny.
This occurs through striking the rock with force. A flintstone is the easiest stone to use for sparks, for whatever reason, I don't know. But they would bang against it. This is what God taught Adam. On the first seven nights of the creation of the world, the sages teach that there wasn't real night. It wasn't real darkness. It was just there was light in the world, God's light. And then Adam sinned on the sixth day, after just a few hours after he was created. And so Shabbos, it was still light, and then Saturday night it became dark. And it became so dark that he was so terrified, Adam, and he said, look what I brought onto this world. So an angel called Raziel, and there is a book called Raziel the Angel, a Kabbalistic book. He came to Adam at the river, one of the rivers coming out of the garden that the Torah describes, and he said to him, don't worry about this. This is not your doing. God wants darkness in this world, and this is what you need to do in order to combat the darkness. And he taught him how to create a fire out of a stone. That's why on Saturday night, by Havdalah, every Saturday night, we make a blessing on fire. We thank God for fire on the night that was created, on the seventh night, the night after when Shabbos is over and it's dark outside, and then we light a fire and we make a blessing on the fire. So the flame, the fire coming out of a flintstone is, today we have it easy. You press a button and the fire comes, or you turn a knob, or you strike a match, and you can take it with you wherever you want. In the olden days, they were taking stones with them, so they can make a spark and create some kind of they had to have some combustible material, easy to burn. They didn't have paper those days, or whatever it was that they used to create the fire, or they could have created it through sun, but you can't do that when it's dark. So you can magnify the sun on, as we used to do as kids, on leaves and stuff. Weren't allowed to have them. That was like having a match, right? I remember discovering that discovery, which was unbelievable. Some thug kid was, let me show you a trick.
We actually got a bowl as in the winter.
A what?
A bowl.
You take a bowl?
A bowl. Put water in it and lift it out and it froze. Took the ice out of the bowl and it works just like a magnifying glass. Because of the
Concentration.
Oh,
It was-
interesting.
That's where my thug friend got it from. Robin knew all the tricks.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the flintstone is an unusual thing. You're taking a rock and you're producing fire from a rock. Okay, it's a spark, but it's still a spark. You can rub the stone against each other. You can do that, and it also comes out. Every once in a while, if you're banging a hammer, you hit it on the right edge over there. There's a little spark that comes out. This occurs through striking the rock with force. In contrast, kindling a flame from another flame entails no more than a touch. You don't have to bang, you don't have to work, there's no exertion, just touch one flame to another flame, and you've got a fire that can burn down the world. Just one little match can do that, or can illuminate the world. This is because the flame of a candle is openly in existence. So to light from one existence to another requires no more than a touch. Since the fire has been lit, all you need to do is put another apparatus that would burn next to it, and voila, you've got a fire that continues to another piece of paper or wood or whatever it is. But the flame of a flintstone possesses only a hidden existence. In other words, a potential for fire. It's not a fire. And therefore requires a forceful strike to bring it from non-existence to existence. It's exertion. It's work. It's like the mental energy that is required to create something that hasn't been here before. It's non-existent yet. And so you got to push it out. You got to bang it out. And banging it out can take incredible mental energy. I can tell you more. When the Rebbe would speak on Shabbos and Yom Tov, so there was no recording devices. Shabbos, you can't use electricity that is in such a form. You can use electricity that's on before Shabbos. You can use a light, but you can't speak into a microphone and you can't turn on a microphone. So there was no recording devices. You can't use a pen. You can't write on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. So there was only one way to record it, and that is when you had people who were blessed with a memory, and the memories, they would piece it together after they had finished. So the Rebbe would speak for about 20 minutes, a half hour or so, and then there would be a break, and they would sing a song, and they would say L'chaim, and it would be, a 5 to 10 minute break, and then he would say another talk on another topic, and then and this would go on for 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 hours on the Shabbos. And so I was very fortunate and privileged to be among this team. So the first thing I wish I could be back on it. So anyway, so the first thing I had to do was make sure that I had a good night's sleep on Friday night. If you didn't sleep well, if there was something to mess up with your energy, then So on Friday night I had Everclear, 190 proof. And I would mix it with some orange juice, take 2 of those, and then get straight to sleep. I lived in a dorm, and it was Friday night especially. There was all kinds of noise from people coming and going, all times of the night, and I couldn't handle that. So, and I was on the first floor, and I was right near the stairway. And so I took a couple of those and tried to knock myself out, and usually I was successful. I knew I had to sleep at 9 hours. I never slept that long on any other night, but Friday night I wanted to sleep well. And then I wouldn't make Kiddush after davening. The Farbrengen was in the afternoon. Like it started at 1:30. And the services would be over about 12:30. And so afterwards you make a little Kiddush, you have something to eat, just to get you through. I never made the Kiddush. I would listen to someone else and take a little sip of the wine, but never drink a cup of there was no drinking on that day. You don't want your mind, again, to be... And then I would eat dry kichels, those are like puffed cookies, just dry, nothing else. There was no cholent, and there was no fish, and there was no challah, and there was no bread, nothing. Just some dry stuff that you can drink a lot, and then in order to be focused. And I can tell you, so this was good night's sleep, no food to mess up with your stomach. You didn't need anything else. It was a good day, strong, good day. By the time this was over, this Farbrengen was over, and I wasn't coming up with the ideas. I was just trying to understand them and remember them. I was utterly exhausted, completely knocked out, because of the mental exertion that was required, the concentration and the focus. And there was all kinds of distractions, because there were thousands of people who were present. And people do different things during different times. Many of them could have been bored at certain parts of it because they couldn't keep up with the idea, or they missed a link and they lost a whole connection over here. And the Rebbe was going on and on and on, or sometimes it was a topic that they didn't know. The Zohar they couldn't recognize, or the Rebbe asked too many questions. The Rebbe would take a Rashi, a commentary on the Torah, and would ask anywhere from 3 to sometimes 20 questions. Like, why does he say this? Why does he do that? Why does he do why this and why that? And by the time you finish, when did the next one? He didn't say, and the 5th question is, he didn't go that way. He says, and then you could also look at this. And then was it a run-on question or was it a new question? And then he would answer it all with one answer. He would give one direction, and then all of the questions would just fall completely down. What Rashi is trying to teach you is, this is what the verse is saying. And once you see how the verse is to be interpreted, then all of the questions that he asked are no more questions. So if you missed a line here, you missed the whole thing. You're not reading it, you're hearing it. And there was no notes, there was no boards, there was no blackboard or something. This was just a talk, and there was no questions. No one said one word. Excuse me, can you repeat that again? No, it wasn't a lecture. This was a Farbrengen. This was one person talking. You didn't get it? Okay, so ask the guy next to you. He doesn't get it? Ask the big ones, the big guys, the ones who had this memory and or the intelligence to understand. So when people are not paying attention and are bored, they do different things that can be distracting. So one guy can go like this. And one guy can go, they do different things. Or they can cough, or they can scratch their head. And it's just, and it's all around you. People are gesturing with their hand, coughing this. You get a lot of people in the room. And some people made different faces. They weren't trying to make faces. They were just trying to concentrate. Each one had a different way of doing things. And there was, when I was a kid and attending these things, there was nothing I could do to keep up with so for me it was who has the funniest face and who has the most interesting hat worn this way or that way or head or back or up, who had the longest hair, who had the biggest beard, who had the colorful, whatever. So when you're an adult, though, you have to train yourself not to get lost in all of the other activities that were going on there. And that took a lot of exertion. It takes a lot. There's a lot of things. There was so much that could have distracted. And so when this exercise was over, I always inevitably found myself completely knocked out. And there was no reason for it. Physically, I was very not knocked out. It was because of using every single ounce of strength to focus and to maintain the concentration on what was being said here, and then committing it to memory also requires review immediate review. There was a guy who stood right on, it was like a bench contraption, and he would stand, build up like this pyramid thing. A guy stood right on top of me, and he could hardly understand Yiddish, and he was a person who didn't grow up with Yiddish, so it was difficult for him. Plus, he was also not quite versed. So anyway, when the singing would happen, I would turn to him and I would begin to review the idea with him, not the words, but just the concept with him, and so it would be a great help. I didn't have to think about it. I could verbalize it. And then as soon as it was over and the Rebbe left, we would gather together and meet. And then after Shabbos was over, we would gather again, and then we would take notes at that point. Anyway, this was, sometimes it wasn't on Shabbos, it was on Yom Tov. So imagine this year, you have Yom Tov starting on a Wednesday night. And the Rebbe would speak at the Sukkot Yom Tov every night, would deliver a talk right after the evening services for anywhere from a half hour to an hour. So Wednesday night he spoke. Thursday night was again Yom Tov, and he spoke again. Friday night was again a talk, and you had to wait till after Shabbos. You had to wait 72 hours until you can record the first talk. Fun. Anyway, so using your mental energy is real energy. It takes up your physical energy as well. It could exhaust you. It did to me. I was young. I was in my early 20s, and I had slept well. And when you really use your mind, you're using, force. That's what he's saying of it, like the Flintstone. You got to bang it, because if it's not here, and this, I wasn't even conceiving the ideas. I was just trying to bring them into me, and to conceive it, you have to think even more. The fifth Rebbe of Chabad, who passed away in 1920. In Russia, in Rostov, in Russia. He is known as the Maimonides of Hasidic teachings. He takes Hasidic concepts to a whole different level. He's got the deepest and the most remote Kabbalistic concepts and ideas. We haven't studied anything from him yet. We've studied some different Rebbes, but not from him. He is very, very heavy. And within that, there was in 1925, no, 1925, trying to translate the Hebrew. Yes, it was 1905. Rosh Hashanah of 1905 began on a Shabbos, began on a Friday night and Saturday, which will happen, I think, in 3 or 4 years from now. And he began a discourse on that Rosh Hashanah about the shofar that's not blown on the Shabbos. If Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, then the first day can only be on Shabbos. Second day of Rosh Hashanah can never be on a Shabbos. In other words, Rosh Hashanah can never begin on a Friday. It can begin on a Shabbos. And we don't blow the shofar on the first day then, for whatever reason. And he asks a whole bunch of questions. Anyway, 2.5 years later, he finishes this. Every Friday night, he's giving a discourse, or Saturday, a Shabbos, and it's 500 and something pages of beautiful and brilliant, but very remote and deep. And then he finishes this in 1908. In 1912, on Shavuos, he begins his discourse by discussing that the Talmud says that when the Jewish people said to God, we will accept the Torah, and then we will do whatever it says, and then we will understand. So angels came down and put 2 crowns on their head. One for we'll do it, and one that we will understand it. And he begins to ask some questions. What are those crowns? Where are those crowns? What does it refer to? 3 years later, he finishes this. It occupies over 1,000 pages. This is the most remote and Kabbalistic ideas that can be brought down to earth that is available. Why am I saying this? Because a few months before this, about 2 or 3 months before this, he was in Vienna, this Rebbe, together with his son, later to become the next Rebbe, the 6th Rebbe. He's the one who brought Chabad to the United States, passed away in 1950, the 6th Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, my namesake. So he was with his son in Vienna to visit. Austria has some very good places for relaxation. They have hot springs there, and Salzburg and in other places. Plus, he had some physical issues and some issues that he wanted to discuss with certain doctors and professors. He visited Freud at one point, also a Jew. Anyway, so he was in Vienna, and they were staying in a hotel. He tried to keep himself, this is not the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was trying to keep himself nondescript. It didn't work. And they recognized him. He was a great sage and a great leader of the Jewish people, as all the Chabad Rebbes took a very active role in helping Judaism, helping Jewish people and businesses and all that stuff. So anyway, so he was in Vienna. He was in a hotel, and he's in one room and his son is in the other room. And after leaving his father, sometime early in the morning, he comes back into the room, knocks on the door, there's no answer. So he peeks in and he sees his father is sitting there. And he has this blank look on his face. He comes back a couple of hours later and his father is in the exact same position with the exact same look. Anyway, many hours later, I think it was 8 or 9 hours, he comes to his father in the room, and his father starts asking him questions. He doesn't say, what day is it, where are we, what time is it? But the questions are asking those questions. He had no idea where he was. He had emerged from something in his mind, and he had no clue. His son writes all of this in his diary. He says, he started asking me questions, and from the nature of the questions, I understood that he had no idea where he was, why he was there, what day was it, what time was it. He had no clue. And then the son writes, a couple of months later, when he began this idea, and then it continued on, it became so remote that I understood that was when he was going through this. He needed to be in a place away from everywhere, and he needed to get lost in his mind to conceive all of this. And this turns out to be 1,000 pages. You don't know how many other times he could have done this and get lost in this. So sometimes a person can get lost in mental. You're talking about the great ones, the most amazing ones. There's another interesting story. There's another Hasidic group called the Mudjitz group. The Mudjitz group. So I've told several stories about this group previously, and they were and continue to be renowned for their singing. They were the second largest group of Hasidim in Poland before the war. The Gur Hasidim, who are today very, very big, were the biggest in Poland. But after them was Mudjitz. Mudjitz was out of Lodz. Lodz is in between Warsaw and Krakow. By the way, Lodz is on the agenda right now. We're working on the Poland leg of the trip. We've done Israel next May. Forgive my commercial. Unabashed promotion of our trip to Israel, to Poland and Israel, but Israel came first as it's the easier one, and we've already covered all of the days that we're going to be in Israel and what we're going to do, where we're going to visit, and believe me, but the Poland one I'm working on right now. This takes a lot of time because you want this to be done right, and there's a lot of coordination because you got to go with the bus and there's the hotels. What star hotels would you like, Rabbi? 6? I wrote the food, 10. Anyway, but Lodz is in between Krakow and Warsaw, and Mudjitz is a little village outside of Lodz. So they were in Lodz. They were the dominant of Lodz, and they were decimated. Today they're very small still. 70 years after the Holocaust, they haven't yet managed to build themselves back up. And they are renowned for their songs, their obsession with music. The first Rebbe of Mudjitz in the 1870s, 80s was diabetic, and they had to. The doctor came to him and says, "If you want to live, I got to amputate your leg." The problem is, though, Rabbi, you're old, and I don't know if I can give you the anesthetic to put you to sleep to do this because I don't know, you're weak. Even today they're cautious. Those days when it was just coming out there. So the rabbi said, "Don't worry, I am going to compose a new tune, and you will see on me at a certain time that I won't be in this world. I'll be out. I'll be in this tune." And how much time do you need? We need a half hour. He says, "Okay, for a half hour, I will compose a tune that will take that long, and you can do whatever you want with me." And the Rebbe went into this, beginning to compose this tune, went into a trance. They did the whole surgery from beginning to end, and they capped him off, and he finished his tune. And that tune is sung every single year on his yahrzeit at the Mudjitz Rebbe who was in Israel. It takes about 38 minutes. I've watched a YouTube of this. I'm sorry? I have no idea what you're saying. Forgive my ignorance. I haven't used my mental energy to think about. I don't know what you're saying.
It's just a 60s song.
It's a 38-minute song.
Oh,
Oh.
I thought you were going to say The Doors and
No.
Light My Fire. All right.
Same era.
Same era. They knew each other.
I'm not familiar with all this stuff. Just somebody was one of my very good friends was a very big fan of this music thing, and he says, "Listen to this song," and it goes into this musical interlude that goes on for a very long time. And then when I heard it a few more times, I realized the intricate levels that he was hitting in this music. It wasn't just banging music out. This was something. I'm a very musical person, but I don't listen to that kind of music at all, because if I did, I would fall into the world of the minds and souls of those people, and I don't necessarily feel my life needs that. So I don't listen. That's something that I don't. I enjoy it. I would very much be into it, but that's why I don't listen to it. And I've trained myself not to even if it's on, I don't really let myself lost in it. There's enough Jewish music today anyway, good Jewish music today, that you could get into that. So the bottom line is that there are times where a person can go into his mind, into the recesses of his mind. Again, we're talking about two great people. But everyone should be capable. Anyone who has at least a little bit of intelligence should be capable of going into a time and going into their minds that is remote, that they basically can remove themselves from distractions, from talking, from noise, from whatever, and just completely focus and concentrate. It takes mental exertion and it uses up energy. That's absolute. But there should be the capability of doing this. If you have a mind, and we all, I think, do, and that's one way to get deeper into the mind. That's like the flintstone, that in order to produce the flame, one has to bang it. One has to have a physical exertion because it's not here. And if something isn't here, you got to find it. If to find it, it takes exertion. This is the meaning of wisdom emerges from nothingness. Although the emergence of the insight stems from the source of wisdom, in other words, it's coming from you. It's not coming from, you're not accessing it from some other person or for some other, you're not reading it. It's in your mind. It's your mind. It's emerging from your brain and your intelligence. The manner in which it is revealed can be compared to finding a lost object. The place in which a lost object is found is obviously not its true and original place. It's lost. So where did I put the keys? I don't know where I put them. If I knew, I would find them. So they're lost. They're not in the right place. Rather, the object must have come from another place. Its original place, however, is not known, since the metzias, or the finding of the object, emerges from non-existence. So you don't know where it is. And look at 44. By contrast, when one plants a seed and later recaps its fruit, one would not call this a find, since its source is obvious and apparent. So when you find something and it's not where you expect to find it, you've got to look for it. That's exertion. And same thing in your mind. You've got to find it somewhere. You've got to look for it because it's not there. So it hasn't been created yet, or it's somewhere in the recesses of your mind that hasn't come out. So you've got to look. When you've got to look, it takes time and it takes energy. All right. So that is where we will conclude today. And with God's help, we will continue this deep thoughts next week.
So, if it comes from nothingness,